Okay. That's cool. Hi, my name is Eric Johnson. 2 months ago, I visited Denver, Colorado, and put in below the home of Brown, Molly Brown, the summer house of the 2 houses the Browns had in Denver, Colorado. That was the way I started my first treasure hunt looking for the Forrest Fenn treasure. I didn't really follow the rules properly, and I didn't find the treasure. Number one thing to remember, just because you don't find the treasure doesn't mean it's not there. In this particular case, if you watch the videos, I think you'll see it could be there. And I'm being sincere about this. I found this iconic structure up on, well, you have to watch it to understand what I'm talking about, but let's just start at the beginning. I look at the area, the home of Brown. I think it sticks out because Molly Brown was an icon. She was a international celebrity at the turn of the century, the last century. And her husband was a very well-to-do gold miner. They met in Leadville, Colorado. She was actually there. I don't know what she was doing there, I forget. But Molly Brown, for some reason, this is before she became famous because of the putting my legs around my cat who's at my feet. This was before she became famous with the Titanic. So for whatever reason, she was in Leadville. She meets J.J. Brown, James Joseph Brown, who is a very well-to-do miner, and they get together and they end up moving to Denver, Colorado, and they have 2 homes. They have a northernmost home, which is today a museum in Denver. Then they have their southern home, which was their retreat, which probably back in the day was fairly remote, but right now it's right on a creek in southern Denver. And so she became famous in 1912 after they had separated, and she became famous mainly for having the guts to force the guys rowing the lifeboat she was on when the Titanic sank to go back and pick up some more people. And of course, they were very scared to do it because the moment that ship went down, and ships can sometimes tilt and go down faster than you expect, it could suck down all the boats and stuff around it. So she forced them to go back, basically risked hers and the other people's life in the boat. They did get some other people in the boat and to save some people, and so that became the iconic Molly Brown. I'm thinking, geez, that's kind of a hell of a story to realize that Molly Brown, her husband, who was a gold prospector, did go to Denver and did have this summer house right on a creek, and there's fertile creek and water throughout the poem. So I thought it would be that house rather than the northern house. And so I kind of skipped ahead and I went right to the home of Brown, thinking Molly Brown's the house. Now this doesn't really follow the poem, which says, begin at where warm waters halt. And I think Fenn himself has said that people don't follow the poem correctly. And I think he's inferred begin at where warm waters halt, aside from the obvious clue that it says begin at where warm waters halt, that is in fact the first clue. And so I didn't follow his etiquette for doing this treasure hunt. And I was aware of that when I went. I just thought I was kind of taking a shortcut. Now, in the course of this video series that I do, I first start out with looking on the internet at the area. Then I go into the Bear Creek Greenbelt Park, which is the park area right below their summer home. When you're there, it's actually about a 5-minute walk. You just walk out, and so I mean, it's really more like a 2-minute walk. You just walk across what now is a street, and you walk into the park. It's this beautiful creek. You can fish in it for fishermen. We all know Forrest Fenn's a big fisherman. I start out then, 1 or 2 videos into this series, I am actually in Denver, Colorado. I traveled out there. I spent 4 days of active hunting. So for anyone that's kind of interested in what Bear Creek or that whole Molly Brown thing looks like and they don't want to spend the money to go there, it's pretty cool because you're going to be there. And I just go around. I'm not in the video at all. I don't really care for these videos where people make themselves, you know, the the focus of the video. I don't really understand that. So I started out in Greenbelt Park. After we've looked at some pictures of the park, which are surprising pictures, and you'll see what I mean when you watch it. I mean, there's some things that just, one of the things that's interesting about people treasure hunting this thing is that there's this whole meme, there's this whole thread about the owl, because owls are, quote, wise. And if you were wise and have found the blaze, something to do with owls. And there was a guy who did a whole video where he had found a topographical shape in the mountains of some region that looked like an owl. And I remember, and I talk about it in the video, it's pretty funny because I kept looking at it, I could not, like he's showing this mountain range and he's saying, there's a face of an owl in there, and I just couldn't see it. It was like a Rorschach test. And at first I laughed at the concept. I'm not really laughing anymore at that concept. I mean, because Fenn himself, as you said, you can use Google Earth, you can use the map system, and it could very well be something that maybe you see from Google Earth. I think he said the blaze is visible from, or maybe he didn't say that. But he has said if you can use Google Earth and the maps and pretty much find this thing with Google Earth and the maps. So what was my point? So when the video begins, when I'm actually in Denver, that's when I go into Greenbelt Park, Bear Creek Greenbelt Park, which is Bear Creek is where the summer house sits. And I look for the blaze. Now for me, the blaze is the most consterning, would that be a correct word? Consterning? It's the most consterning part, consternation. It's the most consterning part of this, well, that's probably not right. It's the most irritating, no, it's the most perplexing part of this whole poem, what the blaze is. Fenn has said, people have said from watching Fenn and everything that the blaze is everything from a white mark to a mark on the mountain to something on a tree to a blaze trail to a sign. People have just multiple theories about what blaze means. And the thing that has made this curious and kind of hard for me as I've gotten into this whole treasure hunt thing. I got into the treasure hunt 3 months ago. I took the trip 2 months ago. The reason I got into the treasure hunt was because a person died and was in the news. And I'm not sure if they've determined that he was in fact looking for Fenn's treasure when he died, but there have been 2 previous to that have died. And so it made the news, and people were calling for a halt to the hunt, which I think Fenn's pretty adamant that he's not going to do. And suddenly, I think earlier, maybe a few years ago, I'd heard about this, but I just I was busy at the time, and I kind of pushed it off to, something kind of interesting people are doing somewhere in the United States. Well, this made me take pause, and I really got into what's going on and was very attracted to the idea this was happening. This treasure hunt that Mr. Fenn is doing is a super cool thing. So anyway, the video starts out, I'm down in the Greenbelt Park, and I'm looking for the blaze, and I'm kind of expecting something unique, that's all I know. And I'm worried about things like trees. Now here's the thing about the whole deal with this poem and everything else about the treasure hunt. We have 3 main information funnels coming at us. We have the poem. The poem is absolutely essential according to Fenn. The poem is where every clue in the poem. We also have a map that he included in his second book, Too Far to Walk. And then, of course, we have all the clues that Fenn and others have put out there. Either they're repeating something Fenn has said, or we're looking at quotes of Fenn, or in one case, I even saw a guy putting something out there who said he heard it from the guy who heard it from a source that had interviewed Fenn. Hey, Bill. Sometimes that can really mess you up, and I think the people that have actually been on the treasure hunt know what I'm talking about. I'll give you a perfect example. In the video, on this trip, the most amazing thing happened. I still keep thinking about it. I can't get over it. I'm looking for the blaze down in the park, put in below the home of Brown, I'm on this creek, I'm going up the creek in the park, I'm looking, I'm looking, I'm looking. I don't find anything I consider a blaze. Now, someone else could very well go there and find the blaze. I stuck right to the creek pretty much a couple of times. Here's something else to think about. I know some people think the idea of going to a big city to find this is not the way to go, because you're supposed to be out in the wilderness, etc. Once I went to this park, I already kind of knew from looking at the pictures of the park, but when I actually went to the park, you could easily hide a treasure in this park. There's no question. It's big. There's acres and acres of land, and you're on a creek, and there's trees that are on the edge of the creek with their roots, big hollowed crevices you can go into, and there's rocks, and there's all sorts of stuff just like you find anywhere else. It's an outdoor park. I did not find what I thought. I never found, let's just put it this way, I didn't find the treasure. Duh. So I extended my trip up Bear Creek, going up that creek. And I have a number of theories as to all sorts of things about the poem. Where warm waters halt, I decide could very well be the Ward 1 Reservoir in Denver, which is north of the Molly Brown house, which is a place where they have both cold and warm water fish. I thought that was a very interesting fact to find out. I thought, as Fenn is a fisherman, perhaps he would think of that as where warm waters halt, because I guess this is not a normal occurrence to have an area where you have both warm and cold water fish together. The trout is a cold water fish. So that was kind of interesting. Then, of course, the home of Brown speaks for itself. Iconic, big international celebrity of her time that we still all have heard of, from the movie The Titanic, and The Unsinkable Molly Brown was a play and all that. So she's in our consciousness, or at least for the older people she is. I looked up the word load. All of this, by the way, I think to some degree is maybe not all of it is in the videos. But I looked up the word load in relation to waterways, and immediately the first thing that stuck out was that loads is the scientific term that they use for accumulants. So, for instance, they'll say loads of nitrate, loads of silt, loads of whatever. And in this particular case, what I came across was loads of pollution, which particularly nitrates, which are polluting Bear Creek. So I had the clever idea that perhaps in his kind of sardonic way, with his dry wit, Forrest Fenn was saying, up the paddle, you won't need a paddle for this creek, referring to up shit creek without a paddle. I don't know. It kind of immediately fit, because I'm thinking, I was just looking for what loads meant because of the term heavy loads in the poem, and when it said pollution, I'm immediately clued into the up the creek you don't need a paddle on, and I'm thinking, this whole trip was like that. Now, there is a mental phenomena that a lot of people suffer from when they're doing things like treasure hunts, and I know suffer from it. There's a general mental condition. I suppose condition is the right word. Phenomena. There's a general mental phenomena called apophenia. What this refers to in general is taking diverse or disparate things, if you will, and giving them meaning or patterns. It goes all the way from gambling. I mean, you see it in gambling, where people start to see design, as it were, into the way things are happening when they gamble. I don't gamble, so I've never heard of this, but I suppose it could happen. To religion, which you could debate that all day with anybody, whether they're religious or not, trying to fit a meaning to everything around us. But in this particular case, there is one aspect of it which I thought applied perfectly to me and some other people that I've read in their blogs. It's called confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is when you take these disparate clues that are around you and you fit them in a pattern that matches, what you're looking for. So in this particular case, when I look up loads and I see accumulants, and Bear Creek has a problem with nitrates, and I suddenly go pollution, creek without a paddle, shit creek, bingo. That happened all through this trip. And that's why I really think this is a cool video that I'll just pat myself on the back a little bit, because it really gets to the heart of treasure hunting and what it's like mentally. The whole area of Denver, and I mean, there's so much that happened on this trip that was so cool. I mean, at one point I'm driving up in this I'm getting up to northern Bear Creek, and suddenly I'm aware of these elk. It took me a minute because I'm not much of an outdoorsman. I'm thinking, are those moose or are those elk? And one of them's pooping. He's kind of looking over his shoulder at me, and he's, you know, big. I took it personally almost, but it didn't matter because he was on the side of the road. Then another time I run into a deer, and then not into it, but you know what I'm saying. And then another deer, and the rabbits are outside my hotel window. I mean, it was just, Denver and the surrounding areas of Colorado are really something else. I can understand why people fall in love with Denver and Colorado and Rocky Mountain High and all that kind of stuff. So I can't think of anything much more to say about this trip for anyone that cares to watch it, except that for those of you interested in the Molly Brown angle of the whole treasure hunt, and people know what I'm talking about. I've seen blogs where people have said, well, what about the Molly Brown angle? And then they take off on that. It'll show you the house. It'll show you the area. You know, you'll go into the park. We'll go out of the park. We'll go up from the park. We'll follow the creek all the way up. There's this one iconic structure that happens in this video series, this trip that happened to me, and I still haven't gotten over it. I was driving along and I saw it, and I couldn't help but laugh because I think I even put the caption in the film, because Fenn says, if you're just driving down the road and you see what you think is the blaze, you're wrong. That's exactly what happened to me, but you have to see this blaze to believe it. I mean, it's like, I'll put it to you this way, the blaze, and I'll tell you what it is, it's the biggest fireplace I've ever seen in my entire life. Biggest fireplace I've ever seen in my life. I'm literally on Bear Creek Road, on the side of Bear Creek, and beside Bear Creek is this chimney that is made for huge group gatherings, that was built by a guy named O'Fallon in 1939 in O'Fallon Park on the side of Bear Creek. And I mean, like I said, it's the largest chimney I've ever seen in my life. I mean, not the largest chimney, it's the largest outdoor fireplace I've ever seen in my life. So I go investigate that. It's actually referred to in the placards that are there. It's a working fireplace still, even though no one is there except a lady with her kids, and they were just kind of roaming around. There are 3 grills, so it's still a place people go. I mean, I could see that people have been using it, but I guess back in the day it was a huge draw, and people would come in huge groups, and they would use this facility. And here's the really cool part about it that I just had to laugh. When you go to the side of this fireplace where it faces the creek, there are some stairs, some brick stairs, rock stairs, whatever. About 2 steps, about 2.5, it's like 2.5 steps, and then there's no stairs. It's a drop off to the creek. It's about a 20-foot drop off to this creek. In other words, you don't go down the stairs because you would just step off into air. And I just couldn't, again, this confirmation bias, I'm going, look quickly down. And I'm thinking, my God, I mean, here are literally stairs that go down a couple of few steps and then break off to the creek, which has all up and down the side of it these, you ever seen these where they take the big rocks and they have them all up and down all over the place, and there's just nooks and crannies everywhere? I went down those rocks and I show it. But I went down those rocks and I looked in holes and I looked in crevices. And then I thought, well, maybe he means, when he says down, look quickly down, he means down the creek. So then I went and found this big, this big thing of boulders that are down from it a little ways down the creek. And I go look in there. There's just a lot of nooks and crannies to look at. But, and I looked in a lot of them, but I didn't find it. But here's the thing. I went to this place called the Muddy Buck Cafe. I'm getting very close to being done here because I know this is just endless conversation. I could talk forever about anything, I think. I go to a place called the Muddy Buck Cafe, and I look up, you know, on my phone, I look up the whole treasure hunt thing again, and it sticks out like a, you know, I think I put in something like chimney or something. And then I immediately hit back with blaze is not associated with a structure of any kind or something like that. And I just went, oh, crap. And so at that point, I've looked around and I've kind of looked into nooks and crannies and stuff, but I just kind of, it was my last day there. I was actively hunting 4 days. And I just kind of gave up. I said, well, it can't be it because it's a structure, but I swear still, I think about that structure and I still swear maybe if I approached that thing differently or was down the creek or something. I mean, maybe he just means it's not associated with structure in the sense, we all know what I'm talking about when I start doing this, right? There's so many ways to read different things, but maybe he means you're not even next to the structure, you're down from the structure. You're not associated with the structure. You know what I mean? I even did, and I know some of you are going to laugh, I even did the thing where I'm kind of going around, I'm looking under these grills, you know, at these, because it's like, there's I think it was 3 grills. And then there's like a stone round thing that where people could sit or have their dinners and stuff. And then, it's a beautiful setup because you could fish right there. You could bring your fish up. You could cook your fish. I think back in the day it was probably incredible. And I think today it's probably still incredible, although you're a little way out of town to go there. But I suppose if you just want to spend a day at the park, it'd be a great place to spend the day at the park. Last thing I want to say is, Mr. Fenn, I think this is a fantastic idea. I know he's taking a lot of crap because of the people who have died. The only thing I'm going to say about the people who have died is they were doing what they wanted to be doing, right? You can have a car come over a median and kill you and you're dead. What were you doing? You're going to get groceries. You could die in a plane crash. Just go into a business meeting. What meaning is there in that? At least these people died doing what they wanted to do. That I think in life you don't have many choices for the way you go, and to think what choices do you have? At least if you're doing what you really want to be doing when you die, there's something to be said for that. I really firmly believe that. So I'm sorry anyone has died doing this trip, but I will say I hope Mr. Fenn, I know he feels bad about it, but I think this is a very cool thing to do, to offer to people. The chance to go out and spend their time outdoors looking for something exciting. In my particular case, I'm not pinning my future, retirement on finding it, but it's a fun thing to be doing. Now that I read the first book, the second trip I think is going to be a little bit more intelligent, but it's still not to say that the treasure isn't out above the home of Brown, because like I said, when you see when you see the synchronicity of the things I ran into on the trip, or the confirmation bias. But I mean, this chimney thing, really, talk about confirmation bias. Holy shit. I was like, you can't make it up. It's right on the creek. It's right on the creek I have picked as the creek. A blaze. Anyway, folks, I hope everyone's having a good time. People, I hope somebody finds this. I hope it's me first. But if I don't ever find it, I really hope someone finds it so that I can at least figure out where it was. And I think a lot of us feel that way. Have a good day. And like I said, going out to northwest Colorado in a couple of weeks. Actually, about a week. Yeah, about a week and a half. And I'll do a video of that.